Well, good morning and welcome to Tuesdays with the Pilgrim as we continue reading Howard Bell Wright's story, The Shepherd of the Hills, with Chapter 8, Why Ain't We Got No Folks? Preaching Bill once said, and I quote, "There's a heap of difference in most men, but Jim Lane, now he's different than airy man you ever seed. Ain't no better neighbor'n Jim anywhere. Right out of his way any time to do you a favor. But you bet there ain't nary a man lives that can ask Jim any fool questions while Jim's a-looking at him. Tried it once myself. Jim was a-waitin' at the ferry for Wash Gibbs, and we was a-talkin' along right pert about crops and all the weather and such, when I says, like the dumb fool I am, 'How'd you like it down in Texas, Jim, when you was there that time?' I tell you, his jaw set with a click like he'd cocked a pistol, and that look of his'n like he was a-seein' plumb through you come into his eyes, and he says quiet like, 'Do you reckon that the rain over on James yesterday raised the river much?' And afore I knowed it, I was tellin' him how that old Red Bull of mine treed the Perkins boys when they was a-possum huntin'. Many stories of the bald knobber days, when the law of the land was the law of rifle and rope, were drifting about the countryside, and always when these tales were recited, the name of Jim Lane was whispered, while the bolder ones wondered beneath their breath where Jim went so much with that Wash Gibbs, whose daddy was killed by the government. Mr. Lane was a tall man, well set up, with something in his face and bearing that told of good breeding, southern blood, one would say, by the dark skin, the eyes, and the hair, and the drooping of the dark brown mustache. His companion, Wash Gibbs, was a gigantic man, taller and heavier even than the elder Matthews, but more loosely put together than old Matt, with coarse, heavy features, and as Grandma Bowles said, the look of a sheep-killin' dog. Grandma, being very near her journey's end, could tell the truth even about Wash Gibbs, but others spoke of the giant only in whispers, save when they spoke in admiration of his physical powers. As the two men swung stiffly from their saddles, Sammy came running to greet her father with a kiss of welcome. This little exhibition of affection between parent and child was one of the many things that marked the Lanes as different from the natives of that region. Your true backwoodsman carefully hides every sign of his love for either family or friends. Wash Gibbs stood looking on with an expression upon his brutal face that had very little of the human in it. Releasing his daughter, Mr. Lane said, "Got anything to eat, honey? We're powerful hungry. Wash Load would better tie up at the river, but I knewed you'd be keeping watch for me. The horses are plumb beat." And Gibbs broke in with a coarse laugh. "I wouldn't mind a-killin' a horse neither, if I was to get what you do at the end of the ride." To this Jim made no reply, but began loosening the saddle girth, while Sammy only said, as she turned toward the house, "I'll have supper ready for you directly, Daddy." While his host was busy caring for his tired horse, the big man, who did not remove the saddle from his own mount, followed the girl into the cabin. "Can't you even tell a feller howdy?" he exclaimed as he entered the kitchen. "I did tell you howdy," replied the girl sharply, stirring up the fire. "'Pears like you might have been a grain warmer about it," growled the other, seating himself where he could watch her. "If I'd been young Matt or that skinny Ollie Stewart, you'd have been keen enough." Sammy turned and faced him with angry eyes. "Look here, Wash Gibbs, I done told you last Thursday when you came for Daddy that you'd better let me alone. I don't like you, and I don't aim to ever have anything to do with you. You done fixed yourself with me that time at the Cove picnic. I'll tell Daddy about that if you don't mind your manners. I don't want no trouble, but you just gotta quit pesterin' me." The big fellow sneered. "I'll load you might change your mind about that some day. Jim ain't gonna say nothing to me, and if he did, words don't break no bones. I'm a heap the best man in this neck of the woods, and your pa knows it." You know it too." Under his look, the blood rushed to the girl's face in a burning blush. In spite of her anger, she dropped her eyes and, without attempting a reply, turned to her work. A moment later, Mr. Lane entered the room. A single glance at his daughter's face, a quick look at Wash Gibbs, as the bully sat following with wolfish eyes every move of the girl, and Jim stepped quietly in front of his guest. At the same moment, Sammy left the house for a bucket of water, and Wash turned towards his host with a start to find the dark-faced man gazing at him with a look that few men could face with composure. Without a word, Jim's right hand crept stealthily inside his hickory shirt, where a button was missing. For a moment, Gibbs tried to return the look. He failed. Something he read in the dark face before him, some meaning light in those black eyes, made him tremble, and he felt rather than saw Jim's hand resting quietly inside the hickory shirt near his left armpit. The big man's face went white beneath the tan. His eyes wavered and shifted. He hung his head and shuffled his feet uneasily, like an overgrown schoolboy brought sharply to task by the master. Then Jim, his hands still inside his shirt, drawled softly, but with a queer metallic ring to his voice, "Don't you reckon it's gonna storm tonight?" At the commonplace question, the bully drew a long breath and looked around. "Oh, we might have a spell of weather," he muttered, but I don't guess it'll be tonight." Then Sammy returned, and they ate supper. Next to his daughter, Jim Lane loved his violin, and with good reason, for the instrument had once belonged to his grandfather, who, tradition says, was a musician of no mean ability. Preaching Bill lowed how there was a heap of difference between playing a violin and just a fiddlin'. You wouldn't know some fellas was a-making music if you didn't see 'em a-patting their foot. But it ain't that way with Jim Lane. He sure do make music, real music. As no one ever questioned Bill's judgment, it was safe to conclude that Mr. Lane inherited something of his great-grandfather's ability, along with his treasured instrument. When supper was over and Wash Gibbs had gone his way, Jim took the violin from its peg above the fireplace, and tucking it lovingly under his chin, gave himself up to his favorite pastime, while Sammy moved busily about the cabin putting things right for the night. When her evening tasks were finished, the girl came and stood before her father. At once the music ceased, and the violin was laid carefully aside. Sammy seated herself on her father's knee. "Law, child, you been sure growing up," said Jim with a mock groan at her weight. "Yes, Daddy, I reckon I'm about growed. I'll be 19 come Christmas." "Aw, shucks," ejaculated the man. "It weren't more than last week you was a-washing doll clothes down by the spring." The young woman laughed. "I didn't wash no doll clothes last week," she said. Then her voice changed, and that wide, questioning look, the look that made one think of her father, came into her eyes. "There's something I want to ask you, Daddy. You know, Ollie's going away, and I was thinking about it all day yesterday, and Daddy, why ain't we got no folks?" Mr. Lane stirred uneasily. Sammy continued, "There's the Matthews. They got kin back in Illinois. Mandy Ford, she got uncles and aunts over on Long Creek. Jed Holland's got a granddaddy and mama. And even Preachin' Bill talks about a pack of kinfolk over in Arkansas. Why ain't we got no folks, Daddy?" The man gazed long and thoughtfully at the fresh young face of his child, and the black eyes looked into the brown ones keenly, as he answered her question with another question. "Do you reckon you love him right smart, honey? Are you sure, dead sure, that you ain't a-thinking of what he's got, 'stead of what he is? I know it'll be mighty nice for you to be one of the fine folks, and there are big reasons why you ought. But it's gonna take a mighty good man to match you, a mighty good man. And it's the man you gotta live with, not his money." "Ollie's good, Daddy," she returned with a low voice, her eyes fixed upon the floor. I know, replied Jim. He wouldn't do nobody no harm. He's good enough that way. And I ain't a-faultin' him. But you ought to have a man, a sure enough good man. But tell me, Daddy, why ain't we got no folks? The faintest glimmer of a smile came into the dark face. You're sure growed up, girl, you're sure growed up. Girl, you sure are. And I reckon you might as well know. And then he told her. And that's the end of chapter 8. I guess we'll have to wait till next week with chapter 9 when Sammy learns about her folks. Until then, take care, stay safe, and God bless.